All right, so this is part of our Why the Law series of interviews with, right now we're focused on former ICC students or graduates. And this individual, you probably heard me talk about time and time again in class. He's one of the two individuals I might have mentioned when I referenced the fact that I used to sit in the same seats you sit in or attended the same classes that you attend. This is Jeff Konvalinka. Jeff was one of my classmates and one of my oldest friends. And so, Jeffrey, welcome and thanks for agreeing to participate in this.
Sure, Tom.
So, why don't you tell us a little bit about first your background and your motivation what caused you to gravitate towards this career path? What was it that
I- That's kind of a long answer. I
it's all
guess
right
I
because these guys probably have all been in the same place, so that might help them, determine
okay.
if they're in the right place.
Couple of things. When I was in high school, I was trying to decide what I was going to study in college, and my parents pretty much made me promise I would go to college. And I was looking around, and I my dad had a business, small business in Peoria on the near north side, and we had a bad experience with the police department. And we felt, and I to this day know that we weren't treated fairly. And so I got to thinking, you can complain all you want, and you can badmouth the police all you want, but if you want things to go right, you want things to be done correctly, you want to treat people fairly, you really have to get involved yourself. It's kind of an extension of, in my mind, the saying about taking care of the community and taking care of people. And rather than just run your mouth and complain and not do anything, you have to get involved. And so that was one of the motivations, probably the main one. And the other one was it looked like it was going to be exciting, much more than doing accounting in an office somewhere, or at that time working on the line at Mitsubishi over in Bloomington, which is gone now. And the jobs at Caterpillar even then were drying up, even then. So I thought, well, I'll try this and see how it goes. Um, and here I am 31 years later.
It went really quick, didn't it?
The days went slow, but the weeks go fast.
All right, so um, you know, you enter classes, you start taking classes at ICC, and I have a good idea of that because you ended up in their intro to police science, it was called then, with me.
Mhm.
And I know that path, but you went all through our program, and then where did it take you?
um, Keeping my promise to my parents, I looked around for a law enforcement program, and one of our other friends was going to go down to Southern Illinois University at Carbondale. At the time, their program was pretty highly rated. That really, if you wanted to study that kind of stuff, it was either Southern or Western. And so I picked Southern with him, and so I went down to Southern, and I started out in a double degree program. My intention was to get a bachelor's degree in what they called administration of justice at the time, which is just criminal justice, and psychology. And so I spent 2.5 years down there at school. Kind of ran out of money. Had enough credits to graduate with the administration of justice degree. I was a few credits short of the psych degree, and I thought, I'm not going to go. I need to get in the workforce, and so I graduated from school and then started to apply for jobs, which was an adventure in and of itself.
Talk a little bit about that. I mean, you didn't end up in the first job you applied to. What?
I applied for 24 different departments in a year. One called me back, and that's when they offered me a job. I went with them. That was the sheriff's department in Peoria. I it was kind of a quick thing, but I'm glad that it worked out that way. It was a great place to work, and I had a lot of good and bad experiences. But the good thing about sheriff's departments, in my opinion, is since you have to do a little bit of everything and you have to work on your own often, you learn how to do a lot of things you might not necessarily learn how to do if you go to a large department or the state police or even a federal job. You're kind of you're a jack of all trades because you don't have a choice. And those skills carry out and help you later if you decide to go other places. At least they did me.
When you say, you're out there on your own, you're talking about geographically, you're, miles away from somebody in another car able to come and help you out.
More often than not, we worked alone. Um, Sometimes you might have a backup car, or if it was a serious call, like say a bar fight, or some kind of violent call, you might get a backup eventually. But at the time, the county was 600 some square miles, not including the city. And on days, there were 5 officers. On second and third, I think there were 7, and with a couple floaters, and that was it. And the districts were enormous. So you pretty much, unless you were in close or a state car happened by or there happened to be another county car, you were alone. So many of the arrests, many of the stops, many of the calls, many of the serious calls you had to deal with alone, at least for the first few minutes. And a lot of the rescue calls you had to deal with alone too, because you would always get there before any of the volunteer fire departments. They have to get everybody together, go get the fire truck and go out to the call. And you're going to be there first.
Okay. So take us from there. How long were you with the sheriff's department?
I was there 12 years. They took good care of me. I got to do a lot of things, got trained to do a lot of things. And an opportunity came along. I'd gone to the National Academy, the FBI National Academy, in the spring of '99. And that's, I don't know how to describe it. It's like a longer term training program for mid to upper level police managers. And I went there. I was pretty young when I went. It's about 3 months, and you get a lot of exposure to cops from all over the world, from all different levels. And I got out there and looked around, and I pretty much, except for vacations, I hadn't left Peoria. Go to school in Carbondale, but that's smaller. And I got to thinking I could do this. Well, these guys aren't any better than me. They're not as good as some of the people I work with now. So I applied for 2 different jobs, the FBI and the DEA. And I didn't make it through the FBI hiring process. At the time, they were focused on accounting degrees, computer science degrees, those kinds of things. And the DEA, someone called me and asked me if I was still interested. I said yes, and I got a call from them the next day. And about a month later, I was in Virginia at the Basic Academy. And that was 19 years ago.
How'd that academy compare to your Illinois Police Academy?
It wasn't hard. They just would try to make it hard. They would manipulate the schedule. They would put pressure on you to try to get you to screw things up. At that time, it was pretty paramilitary. They've relaxed a little bit on some of the things since then. They were big on physical fitness, big on running. They were big on defensive tactics. But the work wasn't that difficult. It wasn't, you could grasp it. I mean, if you had an interest and you could speak English, you can grasp it. They just would make it difficult through the schedule manipulation and the other things.
Okay. And you were, I can't remember how old you were when you went there, 36?
I was 36.
Yeah.
there's an age limit of 37 in the federal hiring process. It has to do with the pension and that. So if you're older, if you're 37 or older, at this point at least, without prior federal experience, they're not going to hire you. And usually they're not going to hire anybody younger than 23. But you don't necessarily have to have law enforcement either. We have a lot of military people. We have quite a few business people. My roommate, when I went through the academy, was a country club manager. And they determined that he had the skills that he would make a good agent. And actually, he's made a fantastic agent. He looks kind of like Howdy Doody. So he's been able to buy drugs.
You might see this, you know.
He's been able to buy drugs everywhere because people look at him and think, you're not the police. You're not. And so he's been pretty successful with that.
Good. All right. So kind of the 19 years since. Give us a little summary of you know.
I'm still trying to get back to Central Illinois. I have yet to get back there. I had two young kids. We moved to Chicago. We lived in the city of Chicago for about a year while I started work in the Chicago Field Division up there. And I worked in a group that they called it the Inner City Source of Supply Group at the time. Basically, it was a street gang group. And there, at different times, there were 5 or 6 of us in it, up to 15 people in it. Everybody had a gang, and you picked the highest target in the gang you could pick, and we worked phones. We did phone interceptions. So if you've ever watched the TV show The Wire, that was my life the first 4 or 5 years I was in DEA. And it was pretty accurate, actually, at the time. My gang was the Vice Lords, a couple of different factions specifically, and some of the Four Corner Hustlers. But everybody had somebody. We had people that worked the Latin Kings factions. We had people that worked all the Gangster Disciples factions. If you can think of the gang, we worked them, except for the Bloods and the Crips because they weren't that big in Chicago. But that's what we did there. So I was more of a gang investigator than a dope cop at that point. We just used the dope to make the cases we wanted. From there, I went to Sao Paulo, Brazil. We were down there about 5.5 years. And I worked terrorism. I worked international drug cartels. I worked specific Brazilian criminal organizations involved in drug trafficking. Most of the drugs we were seeing at the time were coming out of Bolivia through Paraguay, and then they go out through the ports in Brazil. Some of them would come up here, some would go to Europe, some would go to Africa. It just depended. For that job, you had to apply for it, and then you had to go to language school. The language school was about 6 months. And anybody that says, I'll never be able to learn a language, it's just not the case. If you have to learn it, you'll learn it. My wife taught herself, and Portuguese isn't easy. By the time we left, she could speak pretty well and could get by, and actually had a job where she had to work and function and use Portuguese exclusively. I had to also, because we did a lot of traveling within Brazil. And in the large cities, people can speak English, but they often don't want to. So you have to learn how to get by. From there, we went to Southern Illinois. We have a 2-man office in Carbondale. I was there about 5 years and worked pretty much everything in the southern 19 counties of Illinois outside of the Metro East. And it was a little bit of everything. It's a little bit of gangs, a lot of meth, a lot of different things. And then about 2.5 years ago, I went to Pakistan, Islamabad, Pakistan, because I always wanted to work in the Middle East. The job opportunity came up, and that's where I'm at. That's where I've been since. Language isn't as much an issue because English is one of the official languages in the country, but the working conditions in the area are a problem. They're officially they're an ally. Unofficially, sometimes I don't know. There's a lot of work. It's interesting. The majority of the drugs that come out of Afghanistan, the production areas in eastern Afghanistan, go down through Pakistan and they're sent out by sea all over the world. Not so much the US, some more going to Africa and Europe and a lot to Canada. And that's where I'm at right now.
That was quite a trip.
Yeah.
Um, it's been quite a trip. So, that the next question is, a lot of people don't stay in it, right? I mean,
No.
there's a lot of people that make it to retirement, and then some people make it to retirement. Well, they take the minimum retirement, they go out at 20 or whatever. And we know a lot of people who are retired, a
While they're
few
working.
years now. Yeah. Oh, okay. You said that, not me. But so why'd you stay in it? Why are you still in the game?
I don't know. Um, because it's important. It's not about running around being Batman. It's not about a power trip. It's not about any of those things. I mean, I could get real descriptive and talk about the people that we've dealt with on the street that were passed out from a heroin OD, that kind of thing. Those kinds of things affect you. They bother you. But in the end, the job's important. It's not a war. It's a job. It is a fight, but it's not. I don't know how to describe it. It, it has to be done. Can't legalize our way out of the problem that this causes, and it funds all kinds of things that come back against the United States. This job has taught me an appreciation for the country, and I don't want to get all patriotic, but until you've been outside of the US and you've lived in other places and you've seen what people have to put up with, you think it's so terrible here. It's not. And somebody has to take this job and these kinds of jobs, and they have to try to protect what I would call our way of life. And this is a big part of it. The money spent, all the money spent by people on the weekend buying cocaine or buying heroin just to party. Oh, it's not a big deal. A lot of that goes back to the drug cartels in Mexico or to the Chinese suppliers of the fentanyl that's going to Mexico that gets mixed in with the heroin. None of those people are interested in the United States. None of those people care. It's a way to attack the United States. They consider them an enemy. A lot of the really hardcore anti-Western Muslims, they get a big kick out of supplying the United States with heroin because we're paying for the attacks that are carried out on us. And somebody has to fight that stuff. Somebody has to do it. You do it long enough and you meet enough people and you see people that are truly victims of this commerce and the violence that goes along with it. You either get out of it or you decide you're going to try to help. And then you have to think, okay, or consider, uh, how much can I really do? How much can one person do? Can you really have an effect? I don't know. When I was on the sheriff's department, we used to say that we were firemen because all we really did was take care of a problem for the evening. I don't know as what I'm doing now is all that much different. We may be able to stop the problem for a little bit longer than an evening, but it's not going to go away until there's a reduction in the demand. We're not going to be able to arrest our way out of this problem. We're not going to be able to legalize our way out of this problem. Some things you can't legalize. I don't know if that really answered your question. That's how I feel.
You can still, I mean, so I'd summarize what I heard as being, you still consider it your mission.
I, if I have one, that's it. You
Yeah.
know, I've got kids. Um, I'd like to tell you, oh, I'm doing it for my kids, but we've already had all those discussions, and I'm really not that concerned about them necessarily. It's about, the kids that don't have that many choices in life, not the kids
Right.
I'm raising, not the kids they're hanging out with even.
Okay. So changing gears a little bit, you've had you know, a long career now, buddy. You're old. but
As you can
but and
tell
you
by
lot
looking at me, yeah, I
and
used to have a
but
full head of hair and I was thin.
well, and that means that, I mean, I remember back when we used to sit there in class and Doc would bring in all these different people to talk to us and give us, their career advice. So you're that person now. And so the next question is, what advice or wisdom would you give to anyone who's seeking to enter, one of these careers?
This is not a 9 to 5 job. This is not a I get the weekends off job, as my wife would tell you. I missed my younger son's first birthday because I was sitting on the telephone listening to these guys talk about nothing. This is not a job that you just do while you're waiting to find another job. If that's what you have in mind, you're doing yourself a disservice and you're doing me one, because I'm part of the public that you're supposed to be looking after. If Without sounding too corny, if you want to help people, then this is the job, not necessarily the DEA or the sheriff's department, but law enforcement in general, because there's all kinds of a myriad of different jobs, and most all have a reason or a function, and I can't think of too many that are pointless. You got to want to do it. If you don't want to do it, why are you doing it? I mean, why put yourself out there? Because it's dangerous at times. Um, it's irritating at times. The people that you're trying to help or protect will sometimes come back on you, sometimes attack you. That's happened to me a number of times, physically and in the courts. But there are a few things that stick out where I feel like, I did okay there. That was a good thing. If you're looking for the kind of job where you've got to kind of take you're motivated, you're gonna have to be self motivated, I guess is what I'm trying to say. This just isn't. Yeah, it pays okay. Yeah, it's not too hard sometimes. Sometimes it's very hard. But if you're looking for a pat on the back or you're looking for an award or then this isn't the job. Because most of the time, the best things that you do, the most important things that you do, nobody's going to know. You stop the car and you don't arrest the guy when he doesn't have a driver's license, and you don't arrest him because you listen to him and you believe his story when he says, "Hey, I'm going to the store to get milk for my kid, or bread or whatever." And you're not going to do him any good by taking him to jail for the 15th time for not having a driver's license. So you cut him a break. Uh, or you come across somebody in a drug investigation that kind of got forced into doing something they didn't really want to do. And for all kinds of reasons, they don't necessarily get prosecuted. Right? You get to affect people. How you affect people is up to you. But if you don't, if you're not interested in helping out and all you want is a check, this isn't a job. And if it's about you and about making money and about getting ahead, this isn't the job.
Good, good points. Good points. What about, so if, you were back at 19 years old, what would you want to tell your 19-year-old self about things that they should be thinking about? What should your 19-year-old self have thought about character wise, any skill development wise, education, um, things that would allow them to be a good candidate?
The same thing I told my son, my younger son, when he said he wasn't sure what he wanted to study in school. I said, pick something that's going to give you some options. Um, the the junior college program for law enforcement is a fine idea, and I think it's good. I think it's important. Um, you really need a 4-year degree to do anything anymore, and unless you're going to get into the trades, obviously. So if you're going to get a 4-year degree, and I told one of my relatives this, and he did not follow my advice, and now he's sorry. Get a 4-year degree in something that will give you options, give you a fallback. Tom, we both have friends that started out and they were great policemen and women, um, and they were injured on the job, and they were released. They were retired because of the injury, and they hadn't planned or ever thought that that was going to happen. They didn't have a backup plan. So the first thing I would say is study something that is going to be relevant, that is not necessarily directly related to law enforcement, because you can pretty much relate everything back to law enforcement one way or another. The guy that got the accounting degree comes in handy when we do the financial investigations. So that's the first thing. Have a backup after studying in ICC and going on to school. Find something else that interests you. The next thing I would say is, and I didn't do this, choose your friends wisely, um, because the guy that gets arrested and you just happen to be alongside him when he does something stupid and you're 18, 19 years old, you're going to have to explain it later. You're going to have to explain why you were there. Choose your friends wisely. Can't sell drugs and be the police. So, not going to comment on using drugs. That obviously the harder drugs, no, you're not going to be able to. When I was testing, it was you could not use any drugs at all. That's changed somewhat, and it's going to vary from department to department. We allow it to some extent in the DEA. They don't advertise it, but it just because somebody smoked pot doesn't mean you're automatically disqualified. I would get some medical training. If you've got time and can get an EMT basic rating, that's a good thing to have. Obviously you want to learn how to write, you need to learn how to read. And when I say that, I mean more than just getting a C in English. You have to spend some time on it. 95% of my time is writing now. What else would I say? I would sit and think about whether you really want to do this, because it might sound like a great idea and it might be a check for a while, but do you really want to do this? Is this really what you want to do? Because you're going to have to give some things up and give some people up along the way. I don't know. I don't know what else I would say. I'm not going to necessarily advocate, get a job with the federal government, because not everybody fits. And I've known a lot of people that have tried this and they didn't like it and they went back to wherever they were working before. And there's nothing wrong with the small place if the small place fits you. Sometimes it's good to be a big fish in a small pond.
Okay. Well, I appreciate that. I think the students will appreciate hearing from you. Um, you know, um, it seems weird for me, because I plan on having several of these, but this one, I mean, you and I would have been sitting, side by side in class. It seemed like it wasn't that long ago, but it was a long time ago. And I think Doc would appreciate all you shared. I think you got a kick out of it. The fact that you're back here now as a, you know, 56-year-old. You
Close
56
enough.
yet? Yeah, 55 still. Yeah.
Close
You're
enough.
still not there. You're behind me. But yeah, you're back here 55 telling students about your career. I think you get a pretty big kick out of that. So I appreciate you doing it. Um, and, you know, I'll definitely make sure that I play this and put it out there for students. It's going to be on YouTube. So, you know,
Oh,
your
great.
mother will be able to watch it.
Well, I hope nobody falls asleep.
In fact, I'm going to let your mom know when it's up there.
Oh, that'd be great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.